Imagine this. You've just spent, months, maybe even years securing a massive legacy-defining infrastructure contract.
Right, a total game changer for the business.
Exactly. You've mobilized your team, your heavy equipment is on site, the materials are flowing in, and your subcontractors are completely dialed in. And then your phone rings.
Oh, yeah.
It's the client. And they tell you to stop everything, pack it all up, and send your crews home. Immediately.
I mean, that is the absolute visceral nightmare scenario for any construction business owner. You go from 100 miles an hour to zero in, the time it takes to hang up the phone.
Yeah, and it is exactly what is happening right now. Today is March 24th, 2026, and we are exactly 3 days away from a March 27 deadline where Walsh Construction and VINCI have been ordered by the Chicago Transit Authority, the CTA, to fully demobilize their $2.9 billion design-build team.
Which is just a staggering amount of capital to suddenly freeze.
It really is. So for everyone listening in the Scaling Legends community today, we are doing a custom-tailored deep dive into this crisis. This isn't just a news update. Think of this as your protective playbook. Our mission today is to extract the vital lessons on how you can defend your own contracting business when a government client just, suddenly stops paying.
And right at the top, we need to make one thing crystal clear before we get to the weeds. This funding freeze is the direct result of broader government spending disputes at the federal level.
Right.
So we are not here to take political sides. We're not pointing fingers across the aisle or debating the merits of the spending standoff. We are strictly looking at the ground level reality of how these political stalemates impact active construction sites. And more importantly, what you have to do to protect your margins when the capital suddenly stops flowing.
Exactly. Completely impartial, just looking at the business survival aspect. Okay, let's unpack this, starting with the sheer scale of what happens when you hit the emergency brake on mega projects. Because the friction generated here is it's staggering.
Oh, it's massive.
Over in Chicago, the CTA Red Line extension is a $5.7 billion capital project. It is the largest in CTA history. But right now, over $2.1 billion in federal transit funding is just frozen.
Yeah.
So when the CTA tells the Walsh-VINCI team to demobilize, what does that actually look like on the dirt? Because I imagine it's not just locking a gate and walking away.
Oh, not even close. It's basically a logistical earthquake.
Right.
Demobilization at this scale means you have to actively dismantle a small city that you just spent months building.
Wow.
First, you have to release your subcontractors, which is terrifying because, they have their own payrolls to meet.
Right, they can't just sit around.
Exactly. They will immediately look for other work and you might lose them permanently. Then you have to stand down all that heavy equipment. Think about the tower cranes, massive earth movers, specialized tunneling gear.
And those aren't cheap to just have sitting there.
No, not at all. These assets rack up daily rental and maintenance costs, whether they're actively running or not.
Right, and you can't just leave a crane swinging in the wind, right? You have to pay crews to safely secure or dismantle it.
Exactly. You're paying people to take down the work you just paid them to set up.
Yeah.
And then there's the supply chain. You have to halt all material procurement midstream.
Which has a huge ripple effect.
Oh, yeah. If you have, say, custom fabricated steel or precast concrete on a truck or a barge somewhere, you have to figure out where to store it, pay for that storage, and secure it against damage or theft. You're basically trying to cap a gusher of overhead while the revenue spigot has been completely shut off.
It's like hitting the emergency brake on a fully loaded freight train. You can't just stop that kind of momentum without massive friction, heat, and collateral damage.
That's a great way to put it.
And Chicago isn't the only place where the tracks are sparking right now. If we shift over to the East Coast, the Gateway Tunnel project, which is a $16 billion Hudson River tunnel between New York and New Jersey, is actively bleeding out as we speak.
That's right. The work shutdowns there have already cost millions, directly delaying both the massive tunnel boring operations and all the complex surface work packages.
And the human cost is already mounting, right?
Yeah, it's rough. 100 union members of Local 472, the operating engineers, have already been laid off.
Oh, man.
These are highly skilled workers just sitting at home.
And the clock is ticking louder every second for them. Gateway leadership says they only have a 2 to 3 month cash runway left.
Wow, that is nothing on a project that size.
Nothing. After that, they literally cannot make payroll or pay for materials. That makes the upcoming April 16 federal court hearing a life or death moment. If those funds aren't released, we are looking at the potential failure of the largest infrastructure project in U.S. history.
It's wild to think about.
And this is a project that already had $12.3 billion committed to it from the IIJA, which, for those who might not deal with federal funds daily, is the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act passed a few years ago.
And the crazy thing is, that's just what's making the headlines. According to the Smart Business Automator's Market Intelligence Report, we are currently looking at over $5 billion in active transit construction that is completely frozen right now.
$5 billion, just frozen.
Yeah. So bringing it back to your freight train analogy, when that emergency brake is pulled, the momentum has to go somewhere.
Right, which brings me to the $1 million, or, well, I guess $1 billion question. Who actually ends up paying for all that collateral damage? When the dust finally settles, who is left holding the bag?
This is where the reality of public contracting gets incredibly harsh. When a government client freezes a project for political reasons that are, complete 100% outside of the contractor's control,
right,
the massive cost of that demobilization usually falls squarely on the contractor's shoulders.
Wait, really?
Yeah, unless, and this is massive, unless their contract specifically protects them.
I have to push back on that because conceptually that is just infuriating. Why should a private contractor have to eat the cost of a federal spending dispute?
I know, it sounds crazy.
If the government can't get its budget sorted, why does the design-build team have to swallow millions in idle equipment fees, massive storage costs, and broken subcontractor agreements? It basically flies in the face of basic business fairness.
Well, what's fascinating here is that public works contracts aren't really built on the concept of fairness.
Clearly not.
They're built on sovereign leverage. The government operates from a position of ultimate authority, and they draft these agreements to protect public funds, taxpayer dollars, above all else. The legal philosophy is that the government cannot be penalized in the same way a private developer can, because penalizing the government essentially means penalizing the taxpayer.
So they essentially just write themselves an out clause into every single contract?
Precisely. If the money isn't appropriated by the legislature, the agency literally cannot pay you. It's not that they don't want to, it's illegal for them to spend money they don't actually have. So they aren't going to just hand over compensation out of fairness. This perfectly sets up why a defensive strategy is non-negotiable for anyone in the Scaling Legends community doing public work. Political risk isn't a fluke, it is an ever-present systemic reality.
Which brings us to the core of this deep dive, the contractor's survival playbook. Because if you can't control the political gridlock in Capitol buildings, you have to build an absolute fortress around your own operation.
Exactly. You have to protect your house.
So let's walk through the specific defense mechanisms every construction business owner needs to survive a mega project freeze. And it starts with the actual paper you sign.
Right. The contract is your first and strongest shield. Every single government contract needs a robust suspension of work clause. When the client says stop, this clause is what dictates your right to be compensated.
Okay.
But it's not just about getting paid for the day you stopped. You need language that covers demobilization costs, the storage of materials, and critically, your extended overhead.
Let's drill into that extended overhead piece.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people miss how insidious that actually is.
Oh, it's the silent killer. When a massive project is put on hold, your home office overhead, so the rent for your headquarters, the salaries of your executives, your IT infrastructure, none of that stops.
Right, the lights stay on.
Normally, that overhead is absorbed by the revenue coming in from your active projects. If your biggest project stops, that overhead becomes unabsorbed. A strong suspension clause allows you to use specific accounting formulas to calculate that unabsorbed overhead and bill it back to the client once the project restarts.
But what if it doesn't restart? What if the government just decides to pull the plug entirely? That brings up T4C, right? Termination for convenience.
Absolutely. Government contracts almost universally include termination for convenience clauses. In the private sector, you generally can't just cancel a contract without being in breach, unless the other party messed up.
Right.
But the government can. A T4C clause allows the government to cancel the contract simply because it suits their interests, like a sudden lack of funding.
Okay, so if I'm a contractor and I get hit with a T4C, what are the actual mechanics of getting my money out?
You have to know your specific T4C recovery rights, and you have to be ready to prove them. Generally, it allows you to recover costs incurred up to the exact moment of termination, plus a reasonable profit specifically on the work you've already completed.
Okay, that makes sense.
You also get your demobilization expenses, so the cost of taking the cranes down and sending the crews home.
But, and I imagine this is the painful part, you do not get the anticipated profit on the work you haven't done yet, correct?
Correct. If you had a 10-year project and you get terminated in year 2, you lose 8 years of expected profit.
Nah.
The government will not pay you for work you didn't do.
Man, which is a bitter pill to swallow when you thought you had years of backlog secured and you probably turned down other jobs to take this one.
Oh, absolutely, it hurts.
Okay, so if the contract is your paper shield, what happens when that shield takes months or even years to actually pay out? That brings us to cash reserves.
Right. If we connect this to the bigger picture, cash reserves are your oxygen. When dealing with government work, you need to maintain 90-plus days of operating cash. Look at the Gateway Tunnel. They're going to run out of cash in 2 to 3 months.
Why is the standard 90 days, though? Why is it so much longer than the private sector?
Because in private work, a payment dispute might be resolved quickly. The private developer wants the building finished so they can start collecting rent or selling condos. Time is money.
Right, they have a fire under them.
Exactly. But in public work, a political dispute can drag on for months, and the government won't go bankrupt waiting it out. They don't have a profit motive driving them to settle quickly. You, on the other hand, might go under. You cannot rely on next month's requisition to make this week's payroll.
And to make sure you actually get that requisition eventually, you have to document everything. I always compare this to filing an insurance claim.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Like if a pipe bursts in your house, you don't just call the insurance company and say, hey, I need some money for water damage. They'd laugh at you.
Yeah, they hang up.
You have to take photos, log the inventory of ruined furniture, get official estimates. It is the exact same concept on a job site. If your field supervisors are just writing crew on standby on a daily timesheet, that is not going to hold up in federal court or during a claims negotiation.
No, not a chance.
You need granular, time-stamped records. You need to document exactly which excavator was parked, its exact serial number, how many hours it sat idle, which specific subcontractors were sent home, and what materials were shrink-wrapped and put into storage. If you don't file the exact proof, the policy won't pay out.
And you have to do this daily. The burden of proof is entirely on the contractor. If you wait until the end of a 6-month freeze to try and recreate your costs from memory, you will lose millions.
For sure. Here's where it gets really interesting, especially for our subcontractors listening. Let's talk about what happens when the prime contractor isn't getting paid by the government, which means the subs aren't getting paid.
Right, the trickle-down effect.
Exactly. On a private job, if you build out a restaurant and the owner stiffs you, you slap a mechanic's lien on the property. You encumber the real estate so they can't sell it or refinance it until they pay you, but you cannot put a mechanic's lien on government property.
Exactly. You can't foreclose on a federal courthouse and sell it at auction. You can't seize the CTA red line tracks.
That would be something.
Right. But this concept is rooted in that same legal philosophy we talked about earlier, sovereign immunity. Public property belongs to the public, and it cannot be seized to satisfy a private debt.
So if you can't lien on the property, how do subcontractors and material suppliers protect themselves on a mega project?
That is exactly why payment bonds exist. Because subcontractors can't lien on public land, the government requires prime contractors to provide a payment bond. Think of it as a massive insurance policy or a pool of secured money that acts as a surrogate for the real estate itself. On federal public projects, you have to intimately know the mechanics of the Miller Act.
And for state projects, it's usually the state equivalent, right?
Okay.
The Little Miller Act.
Yes, exactly. These acts dictate exactly how and when you can make a claim against that bond if the money stops flowing. But, and this is crucial, there are incredibly strict deadlines.
How strict?
If a project freezes, a subcontractor might only have 90 days from the last day they performed work to file a formal notice of claim against the bond. If you miss that window because you were, say, hoping the political dispute would blow over, you lose your right to claim that money entirely.
It's incredible how many businesses don't fully understand that mechanism until they've already missed the deadline, which is why preparation is everything. You can actually spot these government funding vulnerabilities on active projects in Smart Business Automator's Market Intelligence Report.
Yeah, it's a huge advantage.
Knowing where the vulnerabilities are, knowing which projects are politically exposed before the music stops, is half the battle.
It allows you to check your bond rights and your cash reserves before the client ever picks up the phone to halt the job.
So what does this all mean for the macro view of our industry? We've built the fortress, right? We have our suspension clauses, our key foresee knowledge, our cash reserves, and our bond rights secured. But if we zoom out, if federal transit funding is seizing up, where should a scaling construction business aim its resources next?
This raises an important question because we are looking at an approaching cliff. Remember the IIJ we mentioned earlier, the massive federal infrastructure bill? The authorization for that funding expires on September 30th.
Wow, that is right around the corner.
It is. And if reauthorization fails in Congress, which is, highly possible given the current gridlock, the CTA gateway crisis we're seeing today will just be the tip of the iceberg. We could see a systemic freeze across public works nationwide as federal matching funds just dry up.
And contractors are facing a double whammy here because at the exact same time public sector risk is skyrocketing, the private sector isn't exactly a safe harbor.
No, it's not.
Private non-residential construction has actually been declining for 4 straight months. Office builds are basically dead. Commercial retail is incredibly soft. So the private sector is cooling off and the public sector is a political minefield. It really comes down to adapt or die.
Precisely. And we have historical precedent for this. If we look back at the contractors who survived the 2013 government sequestration, when massive, across the board, federal spending cuts just gutted the industry, the ones who made it didn't do it by sitting on their hands and waiting for the government to turn the money back on.
Right.
They survived by diversifying and doing it incredibly fast.
So there's a ratio we should be looking at, right? An exposure limit.
Yeah, the rule of thumb right now in the industry is that if 60% or more of your revenue is tied strictly to government work, you are dangerously exposed to political risk. You have to balance public and private, but more importantly, you have to target the right sectors within those realms.
So where is the smart money pivoting? If transit is frozen by politics and private office builds are dead because of remote work, where do we actually go to scale a business right now?
You pivot to recession-resistant, highly specialized sectors where the capital is shielded from routine political bickering. According to Smart Business Automator's Market Intelligence Report, healthcare construction is a massive target right now with $30.7 billion projected.
Wow.
Demographics are driving that. People need hospitals, whether Congress passes a budget or not.
What about the federal level? Is there any government work that is safe?
Yes, the defense sector. Specifically programs like the $151 billion SHIELD initiative. Defense spending offers immense opportunity because it often operates under different, much more robust funding authorizations than civilian infrastructure.
That makes sense.
It's considered national security, so it rarely gets frozen the way a transit line does.
And I imagine the energy sector is seeing a similar insulated boom.
Exactly. Energy is pivoting globally. For instance, Japan's $73 billion nuclear market represents the kind of specialized, high-demand capital projects that contractors can pivot toward if they have the technical capacity. The barrier to entry is high, sure, but once you are in, the capital is highly protected.
It's all about having the foresight to move your chips before the table gets flipped. The ability to adapt your client base quickly is just as important as having a strong suspension clause in your contract.
Yeah.
Both are defensive shields against a volatile market.
I'd argue adaptability is the ultimate shield. A good contract might save your margins on a dead project, but finding a new healthy market is what actually grows the business.
Which brings us to a final, pretty chilling thought for everyone to mull over today. But it's something we haven't touched on yet, but it might be the most lasting damage of all this gridlock.
Oh yeah, this is a big one.
For the last few years, the great infrastructure boom was sold to this industry as a guaranteed, sure thing for the next decade. You heard generational investment everywhere.
Everywhere.
But as political gridlock turns that sure thing into a gamble, think about the brain drain.
The human element.
Exactly. If mega projects become known as toxic stop-and-go political gambles, the best talent in our industry The elite superintendents, the genius-level project managers, the master tradespeople, they are going to migrate to private, specialized sectors where the work is steady.
Absolutely.
You might have the 90 days of cash to survive a funding freeze, but when the politicians finally agree and the money turns back on, will you still have your A-team to actually build the project? Or will they have left for a hospital build that actually pays on time?
That is a phenomenal point. You can replace a parked excavator. You cannot easily replace the superintendent who just spent 3 years dialing in a tunnel boring machine, only to get laid off because of a budget dispute in Washington.
Exactly. So your immediate action items for today. Number 1, go pull your current contracts and read your suspension clauses. Understand exactly how your extended overhead is calculated. Number 2, audit your cash reserves right now and check them against 90 days of pure unabsorbed overhead. And number 3, if you are on a federal project, you need to sit down with your legal counsel and know your termination for convenience rights backwards and forwards, as well as your Miller Act deadlines.
Don't wait until the phone rings.
To the Scaling Legends community, thank you for joining us for this deep dive. If this protective playbook brought you value today, please subscribe to the show, rate and review it, and most importantly, share this crucial information with your colleagues, your subcontractors, and your project teams. We're all navigating these muddy waters together. And be sure to visit smartbusinessautomator.com to learn more about the tools and market intelligence that can help keep your business protected. Until next time, stay vigilant out there.